March 12, 2024, Ryazan Oil Refining Company, located in Ryazan Oblast, approximately 180 kilometers southeast of Moscow, one of Russia's major fuel production facilities, processing crude oil into diesel, gasoline, and other petroleum products essential for both civilian economy and military operations. According to Russian officials and local emergency services, multiple unmanned aerial vehicles strike the facility in the early morning hours. Fires erupt in processing units. Emergency shutdown procedures activate. Production halts. This is not an isolated incident. Throughout March, April, and May 2024, Ukrainian long-range drones conduct a systematic campaign against Russian oil refining infrastructure, striking targets deep inside Russian territory at distances exceeding 800 kilometers from Ukrainian-controlled areas. Skyfall Warfare has compiled data from satellite thermal detection, official Russian statements, Ukrainian intelligence commentary, and international energy market analysis to document this strategic aerial campaign. The scale of this drone offensive becomes clear through systematic documentation. Between early March and late May 2024, Ukrainian forces launched documented drone attacks against at least 12 different oil refineries and fuel storage facilities across multiple Russian regions. Targets include the Ryazan Refinery, Nizhny Novgorod Refinery in Nizhny Novgorod Oblast, approximately 400 kilometers east of Moscow, Novoshakhtinsk Refinery in Rostov Oblast near the Ukrainian border, refineries in Krasnodar region supporting Black Sea Fleet operations, facilities in Tatarstan, over 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine, and various fuel depots and storage terminals throughout southern and central Russia. Russian officials confirm most of these attacks while characterizing them as terrorist acts against civilian infrastructure. Ukrainian officials, following their established pattern, neither explicitly confirm nor deny specific operations, while making public statements about the legitimacy of targeting Russian military logistics infrastructure. Which factor was most critical here? A. Intelligence failure. B. Equipment limitations. C. Tactical surprise. The weapon system enabling these deep strikes represents significant Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicle development. While exact specifications remain classified, analysis of debris from downed drones and flight performance suggests Ukrainian forces employ purpose-built long-range strike UAVs rather than modified commercial drones. These platforms likely feature efficient aerodynamic design for extended range, GPS navigation systems for autonomous flight over hundreds of kilometers, sufficient payload capacity for explosive warheads of 20-40 kilograms, and potentially terminal guidance systems for final approach to target. The reported ranges of 800-1,000 kilometers indicate sophisticated fuel efficiency in mission planning. Western intelligence sources quoted by international media assess that Ukraine developed these capabilities with technical assistance from partners, though the specific details remain sensitive. The development timeframe suggests work began well before the spring 2024 campaign, with testing and refinement occurring over many months before operational deployment. The systematic targeting of oil refineries rather than random petroleum infrastructure reveals strategic planning. Oil refineries represent critical nodes in Russia's fuel supply chain. While Russia possesses substantial crude oil reserves, converting crude into usable diesel fuel for military vehicles and aircraft fuel for combat aviation requires functioning refineries. Each refinery processes specific crude oil grades and produces particular product mixes optimized for regional demand. Destroying or damaging refinery processing units creates bottlenecks that cannot be easily bypassed. Unlike distributed fuel storage, which can be relocated, refineries are fixed, high-value infrastructure requiring years to construct and months to repair. Satellite thermal detection data from NASA's Fire Information for Resource Management System, known as FIRMS, provides objective verification of refinery strikes. This system uses satellite-mounted infrared sensors to detect thermal anomalies indicating fires or explosions. FIRMS data from March through May 2024 shows multiple confirmed thermal events at documented Russian refinery locations, correlating with dates of reported Ukrainian drone attacks. For example, data from March 12 shows significant thermal signature at the Ryazan refinery coordinates, matching Russian emergency service reports of fires following drone strikes. Similar correlations appear for the Nizhny Novgorod refinery on March 21st, refineries in Krasnodar region in late March, and facilities in Tatarstan in April. This satellite data provides independent confirmation beyond official statements from either side. Have you seen the satellite images from this strike? Check the sources linked in description. Video footage from Russian social media, verified by open-source analysts, documents several attacks. Residents near targeted refineries post videos showing explosions, fires, and smoke plumes rising from industrial facilities. Russian air defense systems engage incoming drones in some cases, with footage showing tracer fire and explosions as interceptor missiles or anti-aircraft guns attempt to stop the UAVs. However, the successful strikes demonstrate that Russian air defenses, despite extensive deployments around critical infrastructure, cannot guarantee protection against saturation attacks using multiple low-cost drones. Some attacks employ single drones, while others involve coordinated strikes with multiple UAVs approaching from different directions to overwhelm defenses. The tactical execution varies by target and defensive environment. Refineries located closer to Ukraine face shorter drone flight times, but potentially denser air defense coverage. Facilities deeper in Russia require drones to fly extended missions across hundreds of kilometers, navigating around or through air defense zones, but may face lighter defenses if Russian forces assume such distant targets remain safe. Ukrainian planners likely analyze each target individually, assessing defensive coverage, approach routes, and attack timing to maximize success probability. The choice of early morning strikes in many cases suggests attempts to achieve surprise when defensive alertness may be reduced. The damage assessment at individual refineries comes from Russian official statements and industry sources. The Ryazan refinery reportedly suffered damage requiring weeks of repairs to restore full production capacity. Russian Energy Ministry statements acknowledged temporary production reductions at several facilities. Industry analysts quoted by Bloomberg and Reuters estimate that the cumulative impact of multiple refinery attacks reduced Russian refining capacity by approximately 10–15% during peak campaign intensity in April 2024. While this does not cripple Russian fuel production entirely, it creates meaningful supply pressure and forces allocation decisions between military and civilian fuel demand. Which system proves most effective in this conflict? A. Long-range missiles. B. Drone swarms. C. Combined operations. The strategic logic behind targeting refineries extends beyond immediate battle damage. Russia's military operations in Ukraine depend heavily on fuel supplies for armored vehicles, trucks, aircraft, and ships. Reducing Russian refining capacity forces difficult choices about resource allocation. The Russian civilian economy also requires fuel for transportation, industry, and agriculture. Spring 2024 timing, as planting season approaches, maximizes pressure on agricultural fuel supplies. Russian authorities must decide whether to prioritize military operations or civilian economic needs. Either choice creates costs. Diverting fuel to the military risks civilian unrest if shortages develop. Prioritizing civilian supply degrades military capabilities. Ukrainian planners designed this dilemma deliberately. The economic impact manifests in global and Russian energy markets. International oil price analysis shows Russian domestic fuel prices increasing during the campaign period as supply constraints develop. Russia shifts from being a fuel exporter to importing some refined products from allied nations to compensate for reduced domestic production. This represents both economic cost and strategic vulnerability as Russia becomes dependent on external suppliers for critical resources. International reporting by energy market analysts details Russian government discussions about refinery reconstruction priorities and timeline, revealing the lasting nature of the damage rather than quick repairs. Russian defensive responses to the drone campaign include redeployment of air defense systems to protect refineries and other industrial infrastructure. This reallocation pulls air defense assets from other missions or locations, creating gaps elsewhere. Additional S-300, Pantsir, and other air defense systems arrive at refineries throughout April and May 2024, according to Russian military movement reports. However, the number of potential targets exceeds available air defense systems, forcing prioritization. Ukrainian forces likely monitor Russian defensive adjustments and shift targeting to less protected facilities, creating a continuing cycle of attack and response. Electronic warfare deployments around refineries attempt to jam drone navigation or communications, though autonomous GPS-guided drones prove largely resistant to basic jamming. Does this pattern indicate a shift in Russian strategy? Comment your analysis. Russian statements characterizing refinery attacks as terrorism against civilian infrastructure encounters skepticism from international observers who note that fuel production directly supports military operations, making refineries legitimate military targets under international law. Ukraine's legal position holds that Russian territory from which attacks on Ukraine originate or which supports Russian military operations constitutes valid target space for Ukrainian defensive operations. Western governments generally avoid direct comment on specific Ukrainian strikes deep in Russia, but maintain that Ukraine has the right to defend itself, a formulation that provides political space for Ukrainian operations without explicit endorsement. The campaign's sustainability depends on Ukrainian drone production capacity and attrition rates. Each successful strike requires not only the drones that hit targets, but also accounting for drones shot down en route by Russian air defenses. If Ukrainian forces must launch 5 drones to achieve one successful strike on a distant target, production must support this attrition rate. Ukrainian domestic drone production reportedly scaled up significantly through 2023 and early 2024, with government statements claiming capacity to produce thousands of long-range strike drones monthly. Western component supplies likely support this production through both official channels and commercial procurement. The ability to sustain the refinery campaign through multiple months suggests adequate production to support operations despite losses. International implications include Russian complaints to international bodies about Ukrainian attacks on energy infrastructure and threats of retaliation against Ukrainian energy systems. Russia indeed conducts extensive missile and drone strikes against Ukrainian electrical generation and distribution throughout this period, though these strikes began much earlier in the conflict and predate the Ukrainian refinery campaign. The asymmetry in both sides targeting energy infrastructure creates complex questions about escalation and proportionality. Russian attacks primarily target electrical generation serving civilian populations, while Ukrainian strikes focus on fuel production supporting military operations, though both sides dispute characterizations of military versus civilian targeting. If you follow verified military analysis, type verified. The tactical lessons emerging from this campaign inform future operations by both sides and other military forces studying the conflict. Long-range strike drones provide asymmetric capability, allowing forces with limited resources to attack high-value targets in adversary depth. The relatively low cost of UAVs compared to cruise missiles enables sustained campaigns rather than one-time strikes. Fixed infrastructure like refineries presents lucrative targets due to high replacement cost and difficulty of defense. Air defense against small, slow drones requires different systems and tactics than traditional anti-aircraft defense optimized for fast jets and missiles. Saturation tactics using multiple low-cost drones can overwhelm defenses designed for smaller raid sizes. These lessons will influence military planning and procurement decisions globally. Follow-on Ukrainian strikes documented through May and into June 2024 demonstrate continued campaign intensity despite Russian defensive adaptations. Some refineries suffer multiple attacks as Ukrainian forces strike facilities during repair operations, extending downtime. This persistent targeting suggests strategic commitment to degrading Russian fuel production as a campaign objective rather than tactical opportunism. The correlation between refinery strikes and reported Russian logistics difficulties along certain front sectors, while not conclusively proven, suggests the campaign achieves intended effects. What tactical adaptation should we watch for next? Share your thoughts. The economic calculations favor Ukraine despite the cost of drone production. Each long-range strike drone costs an estimated $50,000, $100,000, depending on sophistication and components. A successful refinery strike might employ 3 per 5 drones, accounting for attrition, representing $250,000, $500,000 expended. The damage inflicted includes direct repair costs of millions of dollars, lost production worth tens of millions over weeks or months of reduced capacity, and strategic pressure on Russian fuel allocation worth additional economic value. The cost-exchange ratio strongly favors Ukrainian operations. Russian refinery reconstruction and hardening efforts will require billions of rubles and years of sustained effort, if accomplished at all during ongoing conflict. The documented Ukrainian drone campaign against Russian oil refineries throughout spring 2024 represents a significant strategic aerial offensive targeting enemy industrial capacity deep behind front lines. Analysis based on NASA firm's satellite thermal detection data, Russian official statements from Energy Ministry and Emergency Services, verified video documentation compiled by open-source researchers, Bloomberg and Reuters energy market reporting, and Institute for the Study of War Strategic Assessment. The tactical reality shows that long-range unmanned systems enable sustained strategic bombing campaigns, previously requiring manned aircraft or expensive cruise missiles. Skyfall Warfare continues monitoring this evolution in aerial warfare tactics and strategy. Real warfare. Real analysis. Skyfall Warfare. Subscribe to Skyfall Warfare for documented analysis of real aerial warfare. Sources in description. This analysis is based on available open-source information and official statements as of June 2024. Some details may be incomplete, disputed, or subject to revision as more information becomes available. Skyfall Warfare aims to provide fact-based analysis while acknowledging the fog war.